Welcome everyone. We'll have a short session, half an hour, with a very interesting topic on notaries. And without waiting, I'm going to start with a question. What is an identifier? You will see that sometimes the flow will sound disconnected, but there is a general pattern to follow. So what is an identifier? To not be mixed with an identity. When you hear that you decentralize identity, that's tough, because except if you blow yourself up, usually you are pretty much centralized as a body or an organization. So you talk usually about decentralized identifier that links to one or more identity. An identity can have different identifier, but what you talk about are decentralized, centralized, federated identifier, not decentralized identities. So what is an identifier? That's type of identifier. You all know that when you do your supermarket. Digital product passport, that's another type of identifier with serial number on hardware devices. You have a product number, that's another type of identifier. Usually you have a batch number, a model number, a product number, so you have a lot of identifier everywhere. You have identifier in your identity card, a passport, that's also a different type of identifier. So for example, when you talk about how do I handle my identities, usually that's either how you handle your identities, meaning your KYB, your know your customer, know your business process, that's related to the onboarding. 99% of the case, when you talk about technology, that's how do you handle your identifier, not your identities. It's like how you handle my identifier. You don't handle my identity. I'm Pierre, whatever you want to say about me. You handle my identifier. A lay, that's for an organization. So now we have an identifier for product, could be a digital one, a perfume, clothes, a natural person, a legal organization, and a funny one or something that will be connected to notary. You have identifier for words. When you talk about ontology, if you are not familiar with ontology, you can think about that as a data model or data schema. That's the identifier that specifies that the address, when you talk about address in the context of a vCard, that's called W3C, vCard. A vCard, it's a very old technology that you all have on your phone when you exchange contact through SMS, that's vCard. And that's also an ontology, and they use identifier so that when you exchange your contact, they know that the address on your phone is equivalent to another field name address on someone else's phone, cross-platform, cross-vendors. That's exactly the same thing with a product, a digital passport, an identity. So when we talk about notaries, and why I'm insisting so much about that for notaries, notaries are going to translate identifier from one domain to another. Because the identifier can be, we've seen physical object, organization, natural person, instances. Yeah, maybe the first one we are already familiar with that. An instances of an IT services can also have an identifier. We are here talking about federation of ecosystems, data spaces, maybe a connector or transfer agent or context broker. Those IT services, when you run them, for example, they have a PID, that could be seen as an identifier. So you have an identifier of your services. A word, a property, a statement. Why is it important to talk about identifier? That's because when you want to address exchange of information cross ecosystem, to be very global, you will have different layers of interoperability. For that, I'm using there is the podium in front of it. I don't know if you can read it. The one from the European Commission, which is called the European Interoperability Framework. You have also a standard from the ISO, so those two ones you can check. Overall, they are split in 4 different big layers: legal, organizational, semantic, and technical syntax. Why is it important? Because the technical identifier that you have there, so you did web or business partner number or others, will have impact on the organization and legal. And if you want to have, for example, automated compliance, a topic which I like a lot, because I think that there is a lot of work to be done in that area, you need to have federated identifier, technically compatible, but mostly because you will have to address interoperability at those higher level. And the notary, that's that. The notary, that basically, how do you bring semantic interoperability? I will show two different cases before leaving the floor to Yassir. From structured data from domain 1 to another domain. So you have structured data, you just convert one identifier to another one. It's like a mapping. And unstructured data to structured data. A notary basically does those two functions. From structured data to another structured data, I'm not going to use AI agent or Gen AI. I'm going to rely on good old technology, machine learning. By raise of a hand, by the way, if I'm saying machine learning, does it ring bells to anyone here? Yeah, that's a technical audience, cool. So, machine learning, classification of you can compute the distance between two strings and say that there is a high chance, statistics, of mapping this identifier of type address to another one which is called postal address, for example. And that's how we can work with vCard and Gaia-X participant. Yeah, that's a French screenshot of a parcel to track, and here I can see that I have yet another identifier, and the identifier of that company is probably that different than the identifier of the one that was shipping the parcel initially. So federation of identifier, that's exactly that. And the notary can do that. And then the second cases was semantic interoperability of the identifier, so from unstructured data to semantically structured information. Here we can rely on some more fancier tool, like large language model, that basically translate unstructured data. We could argue that CSV was already a structured data, basically to structured data. To not consume too much time, and I will be happy to take any technical question you have on those points. The takeaway for me for notary will be it translates data from one domain to another, and by doing so, it also federates identifier from one domain to another. And the cases that we have, that's for example, and now I'm going to hand over to Yassir, that's in the context of the compliance to make the link to the previous presentation. When we translate certification paper-based or PDF-based, they already have a serial number or the PDF, but when we issue a credential, we kind of issue a new identifier. So what we do is two actions in two feature in one action. Federate identifier, saying that the identifier of my certification is equivalent to the identifier of my VC, and translate unstructured to structured data.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Pierre, for this part. And now just to give a bit of a link with the previous presentation, and also to give it in the Gaia-X context, because as you've seen in Pierre's part, there was like really nothing specific to Gaia-X, because I think this can also be used for other cases, just FYI. And just now to give the link, and unfortunately we're still not done with all those numbers. So now we have the criterion 3.1.15, just as an example. And as you can see, we have just for level 2 and 3, we need a certification. And that was just a question that was just asked right before. Then we need somehow to get that digital certification. So to link the certification, what it means, it just means that the provider have to deliver one of those permissible standards that are supported by the compliance document. So you can find all these lists that's not complete on the compliance document, such as SecNum Cloud, C5, ISO, or so on. So somehow we need a way to get those certifications from a PDF or a paper into a digital, more useful, usable format. So that's why we need verifiable credentials. I guess you guessed that part. So verifiable credentials are more useful in that case because, first of all, they're tamper-proof because of they're signed, so they're cryptographically secure, so you cannot just change anything on that. You can they're instantly verifiable, so you can just very easily check that instead of a PDF or a paper. Machine readable, so like Pierre mentioned, we can use just the ontologies, and that way we know what those words mean. So that would be, from the previous slide, the semantic interoperability layer. And also privacy preserving, like for example with SD-JOT, selective disclosure JOT, you can select exactly what you want to give as information. So for example, if you go back to the identity card example, you can choose, for example, just to give your date of birth and not something else like your address, for example. Of course, portable and durable, that's of course the digital kind of advantages. And of course, you can update them or revoke them. So you can also check if something was revoked by an issuer instead of a paper, which of course it will be way more difficult to do something like that. So that would be the kind of the notary taken as an input a paper and delivering a verifiable credential. So now just a kind of a diagram just to give a non-complete, complete and inclusive list of what a notary can do to verify such a document and deliver then a VC. So we have multiple steps and just divided that into multiple slides. So we have just here the service provider that would deliver kind of a certification. So for example, a Secnum Cloud. And then therefore the certification notary would just take that, and first of all, of course, it would take that document, then it would just need to extract the data, first of all, because of course it's a PDF, but it needs to be extracted. So we have also, for example, OCR with the optical character recognition. So to extract all the data for that, first of all. Second thing, we can check the CAB, for example, I think Secnum Cloud is delivered by the ANSSI. It's the ANSSI, it's the French agency that delivers, where you can check if that certification is all good. So that's why we have the trusted registries and also trusted data sources and so on. So the notary's goal, first of all, is to verify, take that certification and verify it. Next, so the next part is also check the provider's identity. So the notary also requires, for example, a certificate, an X509 certificate with the DID, for example, from the provider. So it needs, of course, to check the provider's identity, that it matches what's in the certificate and the identifier with the DID of the provider. And of course, check the validity, so the expiry of the certificate, so it's valid or not. So that would be mapped, for example, if you're familiar with verifiable credentials, to the valid until, valid from in the second data model. And then would be mapped to the VC schema. Here we're talking about CAP, so we're just going to talk about it right afterwards. It's just an ontology, which is called the Conformity Assessment Profile. And I think Pierre have had some details on that, which exactly is for this purpose. The last part also is just check, I think there's more steps, sorry, but here in this slide, just check against the trust framework policies, because there's certain, of course, certain, I showed you permissible standards that are accepted by the compliance and also some of the CABs. And the last part here is really there's 9 here to log the evidence and proof, and this is just for more auditability and just to be able to have auditable tracks on such a process, and then just generate the VC that would have the same kind of value and even more advantages than that certification. And optionally, it could have an active revoked kind of status, like for example, the VC bitstring status list to check if that VC was revoked or if it's still active. And finally, just deliver that VC to the provider, and then you can see here the whole flow. So all those parts, it's a bit hard to read now because it's, so big, but you can see that, it can be delivered back to the provider, and then the provider can use it for much more purposes and a bit more usable, of course, with the, like you mentioned, automated compliances, for example, such as Loire. And we just have here to show you that we have a repo. So Ryan already mentioned it with the certification notary. Of course, this repo doesn't perform all that part because, of course, that's a completely different job and different scope. But this is just just a way to start. It really doesn't do any of the logic itself, but it's really just to give the kind of the sandbox and just to agree also on the API interfaces and so on. It's just easier that way. And then I'll just hand out to Pierre to give the link to the CAP I mentioned before.
Thank you. So when we say that the notary indeed is converting one domain, one data structure to another data structure, one of the domain we had to translate to was conformity or compliance. So how do we translate those because Gaia-X Gaia-X is about trusted data transaction. To know where the data is coming, where it's going, we need to also to know what are the type of certification that are attached to the infrastructure. For example, is the infrastructure where the data going or coming, if you are talking about health data, is health qualified? In France, there is HDS, health. If I'm going to translate in French, it doesn't really matter. So HDS is a French qualification for storing health data. There is probably one in Spain. I don't know if anyone knows the name here. No, there is probably one for hospital and clinics. The good thing is that all the world of the compliance was created years ago. It's very stable. Made sure to do one thing, risk assessment or risk management. So how do I reduce the risk in my exchange, in my daily routine, in my industry? By having compliance and conformance to some schemes. And this is being specified at the ISO already. So what the Eclipse, what we are doing at the Eclipse Foundation, that's to define an Eclipse conformity assessment profile, CAP, that basically translate the ISO specification of conformity assessment into an ontology. I think I have an example somewhere. So an attestation, yeah. If I just take a class which is called an attestation, so here is the name is the copy-paste of the ISO definition. And what we've done is to translate English from the ISO specification into a machine-readable structure to express the same thing. And the Eclipse Foundation is also a fast track, a pass submitter, so that this specification can also then be, they can go also to the ISO. An example of why we are interested by that, the dataset something should only be processed on ISO 27001 qualified services in Valencia community. How do I translate these human English rules into machine-readable way? You can translate that in Rego, in OGRL, and that's fine. But how do you evaluate that unless you have a digital equivalent of this ISO qualified proof? So that's what we do. That's the machine-readable version of the ISO certification when you have, you used something fancy earlier? Yes. Okay, sorry, okay, stop. A certification, a date, valid from, valid until, the scope, who is the issuer. And that allows a machine to perform reasoning on rules that require, for example, a certification here that's Sectum Cloud, but ISO will be exactly the same thing. And because that's embedded inside a GWT, a JSON Web Token, you have all the good features that were presented earlier about cryptographic proof, who issued it, where it's coming from, revocation if required.
And this is the exact example for the previous presentation for Loire, so Sectum Cloud can be used in the Loire compliance.
Thank you very much, and we will be very happy to take questions. You wanted maybe to add something or no? No. Question? Yes.
In your opinion, who should run or govern such a notary in a digital ecosystem?
Yeah, there are several options. So the notary has a fundamental rules. As I said before, it translates data unstructured to structured, but also federate identifier. So few use cases that we have observed so far. One of them is, in the case of the conformity assessment scheme, it's directly nominated by the organization issuing the certificate, saying that you are a conformity assessment body, and you say that if you want to translate in a machine-readable way my certification, please go to any of those notaries. So this is more like a centralized approach. You could also have the same thing with a data space or an ecosystem during the onboarding. Basically, anyone here already a member of an ecosystem or data space, they will probably have gone through some onboarding steps. Show me your company details. That's the role of the notary. maybe a manual one that was done with hands of paper that you sent to the postal office, maybe by email. But that's the role, the feature of Notary. What they've done is translate paper-based data into another type of information model. And that in that case, the governance is directly linked to, if we talk about a data space, you have a data space governance authority, and it will be the data space governance authority that says, if you want to notarize those documents, those type of documents, go here. If you want to notarize those type of other documents, go there. So there is a kind of a registry that lists the available ones.
So basically, traditional KYB and KYC mechanisms.
Up to the point, but that will be a presentation I will give tomorrow, where I strongly believe that over time, the frontiers of those barriers will slowly fade away, and there will kind of a self-regulation, reputation-based mechanism where, yes, okay, if you know Ernst & Young and Bureau Veritas and a few others, those are reliable parties that you can trust because they build their reputation over time. But today, because data space is rather still new, we need to rely on a more centralized governance.
Thanks.
Just add one quick remark to that part. If the great thing about credentials as well is that if you want to further restrict that list, you can also do that by just, for example, checking the issuer of the verifiable credential and have even a more restrictive list of who you want to trust or not.
May I? Can you please show again the slide where you have the characteristics of the verifiable credentials? Because it was not clear for me how do you the characteristics of
the example
before another one, that one.
Okay.
So if the credentials need to be verified against the issuer every time they are used, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everything there's an exchange between a holder and a verifier. Of course, you need to verify those credentials.
Yeah, because they might be cryptographically secure, but they need to be verified every time they are used.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But, I mean,
Yes. But they don't need to contact the issuer. In the trust model, you have an issuer, a holder, and a verifier. So what the verifier and the holder verifies, that will be the cryptographic keys, the content, tamper-proof, that's one of the items there. If they want to verify if this is being revoked or not, within the credential, at the time of the issuance, there will be a special service URL that you need to query. So it depends what you want to verify. If you want to verify the cryptographic tamper-proof or the fact that it's not tampered with, you don't need to contact the issuer. That's just standard signature, computation, and verification. Fair. And the public key is in a verifiable data registry. If now you want to check if this is being revoked or not, you have more or less fancier implementation. But if you are familiar with the OSCP protocol from X509, it just have with at the sorry, go quickly to that one. Here, you have to imagine that here you have another line that says revocation list status. So at the time of the issuance, the issuer already embed in the GWT a place where the revocation status can be later checked. And then, if you want to check it, then you, at the time of the verification, real time, at the time of the transaction, you can query that services. How this service is being implemented in a centralized manner with the web services on a blockchain, on a DLT, that's up to the implementation. So you don't have to concentrate everything in one place.
Sorry. There are some announcements that some clearinghouses are providing level 2 or level 3 levels to specific companies. Do you know what kind of notary they are using to translate the physical papers to the compliance?
Gaia-X or the
Gaia-X, yeah.
Yes. So there is two type of. You want to? Okay. There is two type of notary so far. It was hinted in my answer. You have specific notary per type of document you want to notarize, if I may say. In the clearinghouse, in the Gaia-X digital clearinghouse, the implementation of the notary that we have are for business registration number. So the implementation basically takes unsigned information and go check for European companies directly to the European Commission website for the VAT numbers, to the GLAIF API for the lay number, and to European Commission website also for the customs or EORI numbers. That's one implementation of the notary by Gaia-X. For the translation of certification into machine-readable credential, Gaia-X maintain, like for the clearinghouse, a list of approved and listed notary services. So in the Gaia-X registry, the same way you will have the list of Gaia-X Digital Clearinghouse, you will have the list of Gaia-X approved notary. And that are run by companies, by member, by third-party service provider. And those service providers are then translating those certifications.
But it's listed, including in the registry?
It's included in the registry, yes.
We'll try.
It's a fairly new feature that was developed for Label 3, so maybe that's it was updated like a few weeks ago, days ago.
But it's a recurrent question, because last meeting we asked the same question: what are the way to translate the certification? Okay, if this is okay right now, it's perfect.
It's okay right now, and we know that's okay because we have it's going to be presented later in the plenary session. We have today 10 label level 3 Gaia-X. We have 10 Gaia-X label level 3 services that went through the official clearinghouse with a proper verification of the certification through an accredited or enlisted notary. So the chain has been completed full end-to-end. Any more questions on the role of notary? And I'm quite sure that you've already had experience with a notary. Probably not like the one we've just described with APIs and fancy credential, but anytime you have to show credential a pass, when you go to, if you are not living here, you're probably checked in your hotel. When you do your checking, that's a notary. They ask for your identity card, and basically they are going to translate your identifier on your identity card in some identifier in their database.
Sorry, Pierre, a little bit off topic. But as you mentioned, the Eclipse.
Don't ask which hotel I study.
Well, probably I know. You know, when you mentioned the Eclipse Data Spaces Working Group, well, you know, there's news that for February this year, there's going to be a new standard with connectors, and they are claiming that they will be integrated with the Gaia-X verifier credentials. Do you know something about that? They say that it's going to be rather easy, just clicking a button and everything is done. Anything that you can share?
I can share what I can read inside the source code. So if I'm opening the source code of the ETC implementation, they are using W3C credential, like the one we are using in Gaia-X.
So that might be a yes or a maybe, or...
I haven't tested my solution myself, so I will not say yes, no. I will say that per the source code I read, it should work.
Okay, thanks.
And there are always details, devils is in the details. Are they using verifiable credentials version 1? Are they using verifiable credentials version 2? Which type of DID methods they are using? You know, on the paper worked. Are there any constraint put in the software later that I haven't checked? I don't know. But it should work.
However, there will be a presentation on that tomorrow, so I'll invite you to take a look at that with the more details. Any more questions? Otherwise, thank you very much. I think we're the last one holding you from lunch, so thank you.